We're going to stay with the farming theme now, as you've probably gathered, for our first keynote. We're delighted to welcome someone at the forefront of that regenerative farming movement in the UK, which is gaining significant traction in our supply chains. George Lamb is co-founder of Wildfarmed. George is going to share his journey from television and radio to leading player in this field, how Wildfarmed is challenging established food system thinking and disrupting supply chains. Ladies and gentlemen, George Lamb.
Thanks very much. How are we doing, everybody? We all right? We good? Still awake? My name's George Lamb, and I'm a co-founder of a business called Wildfarmed. That's me. That's the kind of 2.0, very wholesome version of me helping lost cows out. There was a kind of Windows 95 version of me that came before this one, which is this guy, a lot more kind of pouting and posing and significantly less cows. I'd unwittingly found myself working as a television host I was about 25, so this is mid-noughties. I thought it was a stopgap. And then who knew, but the kind of trappings of fame and fortune quite intoxicating, and I stayed around a little longer than I probably should have. And I started getting drawn, which is what happens if you follow the money in television, towards what's called shiny floor, which is kind of light entertainment and game shows. And so I kind of ran this whole story that when I get to X, and my X was going to be primetime television, I was going to be really happy. For anybody who's done this nonsense in life where you set these kind of goals where your whole life's going to change radically at this point, you'll know fine well that when I got onto prime time, nothing changed apart from the time I went to work. And in the middle of a live television show, I had this kind of Damascene moment, and I got this very strong voice in my ear telling me that I was wasting my life. And I was fairly sure, even though I didn't know what I wanted to do, I was fairly sure that my star hadn't been called down out of the ether and placed on earth to be a game show host. And so I finished the show, and I went home to my nice house. And the following morning, I woke up and I was feeling, just totally kind of empty and drained. And I rang my dad, who's an actor, and I called him and I said, "Dad, listen, I know this sounds really cliched, but I'm in my nice house with all my stuff and all the stuff that shows you that you're a success, and I feel totally empty." And he went, "Well," and I was like, "Well, what?" And he was like, "Well, game show host." And I said, "Yeah." And he went, "Not a very serious guy in the big scheme of things." And I was like, "Great, Dad. Thanks. That's ideal. You could have told me that 5 years ago." Anyway, my next call was to my agent. I told him I didn't want to do it any longer, and I decided I was going to sell my house, renounce all worldly goods, and I went off to the east and had a full-blown eat, pray, love moment. I spent a couple of years just soul-searching, a lot of meditation, a lot of yoga, a lot of plant medicine, just really trying to figure out who I was, what the whole point in all of this was. Started to get some great downloads, was ready to come back to the UK and reintegrate with all this new knowledge and do some good in the world. And just as I was about to do that, I thought, you know what, fuck it, I might just have one last summer in Ibiza. And so I went to Ibiza, and I was staying with a friend, and he said, "A mate of mine's DJing tonight. He's a really interesting guy. We should go and meet him." And I walked into this nightclub, and there was this huge man there who's now my business partner. He's a guy called Andy Cato. Now, he looks really good, and he looks happy there, but let me tell you, when I met him, he was not happy, and he was not good. And he looked awful. And I'm not talking like 5-day, Ibiza bender awful. I'm talking about deep existential crisis, man on the edge awful. And so the first thing I ever said to him was, "Are you okay?" And he proceeded to tell me he wasn't okay. And then he started to tell me, I said, "What's going on?" He said, "I sold my publishing rights, which is basically your pension as a musician. And I decided I was going to buy a farm down in Gascony in the southwest of France, where he was living at the time. And the whole thing's a disaster. And I think I'm going to go bankrupt. And that's why I'm here DJing, because I'm just trying to prop up this disaster that I'm carrying on back at home." And I'm there, and you imagine it's like, and all the lights are going, and this guy's here, and I'm just like, I don't know what's happening. I don't really know what I'm hearing. But as I kind of pulled back, I had this real clear, kind of realization that I'd spent the last 3 years in the mountains and the jungle looking for this guru. And in fact, he'd been in Ibiza the whole time. And I was just like, you're amazing. This is the most brilliant story that I think I've ever heard. Like, can we meet again next week? Because he was coming back every week to DJ. And so we'd meet all the way through the summer. And by the end of the summer, I decided I was going to go and visit him on his farm in France. And I drove up through Spain and went to France, and I went to the farm and I saw him and I met the family and I saw the sheer kind of scale and ambition of what he was trying to do. And we walked around these fields and basically he explained to me that great tasting food starts with great farming. And although I didn't know anything about farming at the time, when I heard that, it really resonated with me. And so I pretty much just put my hand out and said, listen, I don't know what I can do and I don't know how I can help, but I can amplify things and I can bring energy to stuff and I'm good at telling stories. So why don't we see if we can work together, and why don't I see if we can help this kind of vital work that you're doing get put out into the world. And so we didn't realize it at the time. But this was the beginning of what is now Wildfarmed. We're a regenerative farming and food business. Ultimately, what we do is we grow quality food in nature-rich landscapes. So ultimately, we've got to ask ourselves a question. There's been a lot of it today. Where do you want your food to come from? If you imagine, this is where, this is kind of conventional turned up to 11. This is regen, similarly turned up to 11. A lot of the land where we're growing food at the moment, unfortunately, are kind of biological deserts, basically. And so ultimately, what we're trying to do is we're trying to move away from this over-reliance of chemicals and move towards a more biological system. As a result of us farming the way we do, Wildfarmed is better for taste, nutrition, and environmental impact. How we got here, I'm sorry, I'm rattling through this because it's kind of like 15, 20 years in 20 minutes. As I said, Andy was a DJ. He was having a great life. He was coming home from a gig one time, read an article. He was on a layover in Munich airport. He picked up an article. Article went something like this: food production is the #1 cause of soil degradation, deforestation, and biodiversity collapse. Not ideal for a room full of food service people. Anyway, we can do something about it. That's the good news. He read this. He's a man of deep integrity. He started growing his own vegetables. Vegetable patch became a polytunnel. Polytunnel became a stall at the local market. Before you knew it, he had the incredibly naive kind of decision to sell his publishing rights and buy this farm. It all started going badly. He spent 2 years in this kind of doom spiral, just in a kind of futile war against weeds. And he got to the point where he was like, I think I've actually got to sell the farm and just bail out of this thing. And he was back in the UK. He was looking for a book for his daughter. She was young at the time. And mislabeled in the kids' book section was this absolute beauty, an agricultural testament. If you haven't read it, you should. Sir Albert Howard, he's been dead 100 years, quite a remarkable man. He's one of the founding fathers, along with Lady Balfour, of the organic movement. Basic thesis of the book is plants and animals have developed over millennia working in perfect symbiosis. And when you separate them, you take a beautiful solution and you create all sorts of problems. So old MacDonald had it right. You need a quack quack and an oink oink and a bit of this and a bit of that. Mixed farming, that's how it always used to be. And so he realized he didn't need to sell the farm. He needed to get 40 head of cattle. What could possibly go wrong, Andy? It's all been such a success the last couple of years. Anyway, fortunately for him, these guys are nature's composting machines, and they know exactly what to do. And they came onto the farm, and very soon after, all the biology was back in there, the biodiversity, and it was thriving. And so began a kind of 15-year deep dive down this regenerative rabbit hole. I don't expect you to read all of this, but I just want to remind anybody who's got their own business, they're starting out, and maybe looking at some of their competitors roaring away. They're thinking, am I ever going to make it? Overnight success stories take a very, very long time and a lot of hard work. Our story started in 2008. 2011 is when he buys the farm. The next 4 years was just test and learn. The whole thing was a bit of a disaster, except it kind of brought us to where we needed to get. We were going down, myself and Ed, the other co-founder, we were going down there in 2013 onwards. Gradually, we helped Andy open a bakery in the local village. We had the first bread queues since 1945, which for an Englishman is quite a big thing in France. And word spread up to Paris. He was invited up by François Hollande, who was Prime Minister at the time. And he was made a Chevalier de Mérite de l'Agricole, so he's the first ever British farming knight in France. It was with a heavy heart that the agricultural minister handed that over. And then he won the laureate prize for most innovative farm in France. So at this point, we were like, I think this is on. I think something's happening here. And so we don't speak French, so we were encouraging him to come back to the UK. We put him in for a tenancy, a long tenancy, a kind of marquee National Trust farm just outside near Swindon. And there was 3,000 applicants. It was like a kind of sustainability X factor. Anyway, of course, he won it. And we moved him back to the UK. And so began kind of Wildfarmed proper. So what do? It all starts with farming, obviously. This is a repetition of the same photo. If you look at the top, you'll see there's an arable crop being grown there. On the right-hand side, usually I've got a little pointer. On the right-hand side, you'll see it's in a conventional system. On the left-hand side, you'll see it's in a perennial regenerative system. Have a look at the difference in the root networks. When a plant's stressed, it sends out an SOS. It's looking for moisture, basically, and it will go down there. It's looking for moisture. It's looking for nutrients. If it doesn't have that strong root network, what's going to happen? Come on. It will fail. It will die. Anybody interested / worried about food security in their job? Yeah? That's your answer. That's your solution right there. If we do regenerative properly, we're as safe as we can be, basically. So our farming community, we're about 150 farmers now around the UK. We started off with all the kind of, ultimately there was a bunch of regenerative farmers already working in the UK, and they were desperate to have a banner to come under, so we went and we talked to them, and then we realised actually what we needed is to start moving some of the 98% of conventional farmers across. And so we built this community. We've tried to meet farmers where they are rather than standing over on the sidelines with a load of dogma telling them they're doing it wrong. We've tried to support them by doing stuff like feeding according to need. So we pay for SAP tests, which is basically like a blood test for a plant, so we can figure out exactly what the plant needs. More often than not, there's nitrogen actually in the soil, but because there's no manganese or cobalt or something like that, it's not biologically available. And so yeah, we do a hell of a lot of work with these farmers, supporting them. We reckon we've got about 2,000 years of collective farming knowledge in our kind of hive mind now, and this is when things start to get really interesting with a network effect, pushing stuff forward. We often talk about regenerative being ancient wisdom with modern technology. It turns out that our WhatsApp group was one of the best bits of modern technology that we brought into this whole thing. It's quite beautiful. You realise, well, you only realise retrospectively how isolated farmers are, what a lonely business it is. Often, 100 years ago, there would have maybe been 10, 20 people working on the farms. Now we've got 1, 2, 3 people working. They're making huge decisions about their families' livelihoods in increasingly erratic weather conditions. They've got these tiny windows to make massive decisions. We're asking them to be really brave. And the realities of the food system, unfortunately, a lot of the risk burden sits on these guys' shoulders. And so we're trying to do as much as we can to make them feel supported. And actually what's great is, I get up about 7, but already I can be sure that the growers group's already pinging away. And they're messaging each other like, I've had this problem. Have you seen a solution? Actually, you should talk to Tim or Tom. They're mainly called Tim and Tom. And they're just sharing ideas, and they're trying to move the whole thing forward. And it's really beautiful to behold. Helen Browning, she's one of our growers. She's chair of the Soil Association. It's not enough to achieve 2, 5, or even 20% of good things happening on our land or on our dining tables. We need a revolution, and Wildfarmed are making that possible. Because of the way we farm, because of the way we scrutinise it, we're able to offer 5 guarantees to our customers, you guys. Number 1, our grain is pesticide free. Number 2, we're improving soil health and increasing biodiversity. Number 3, we're reducing carbon. 4, we're minimizing water pollution. You hear a lot about the fact that 25% of our river pollution is coming from raw sewage. Any idea what's coming from agricultural runoff? 40%, totally unnecessary. Totally unnecessary and avoidable. Number 5, 100% traceable from field to fork. We're giving you unprecedented levels of visibility on our supply chain. I'm not saying there's not, I hope there are, but I don't think there's anybody doing it at the scale we're doing it with this level of traceability. As a result of all this, we're fast establishing ourselves as the gold standard for quality, whether you're interested in taste or outcomes measurement or traceability or regen as a whole. These are the benchmarks that we're going after and aiming to be best in class. Second, along the line, after you've got the farming, you've got food. We're giving consumers real choice on the high street. If we don't do this, it's all just a pipe dream, basically. Newsflash for you, procurement budgets change landscapes. You have agency in this, guys. We've built a community so far of about 1,000 strong. We started off working with all the amazing artisan bakers like Jolene and Marmadukes, and they're wonderful people and they're working tirelessly and they're meeting the ambition of these great farmers. And then we started to work with more high-profile chefs like Tom Kerridge and the guys at Manteca and Fat Duck, and then gradually working our way up onto the high street. And we started working, our first big retailer was M&S, and we're working with Frank and Manka. And we talked since when we first started, actually, the first homepage of our website said we're on the long road to Greggs. And we still stand by that, and that's the direction of travel, because we want to be dealing with the people who are buying the most flour, because that's how we can affect the most change. And so we've done a deal with them. It's a small deal for the time being, but we're working on it, and it's beginning. I'm just going to talk you through a bunch of these relationships at random, just to, everybody loves an anecdote. This guy, Pep Guardiola, he's having a bit of a shocker at the moment, but I want you to cast yourselves back. A couple of years ago at Christmas, Man City were 9 points behind Arsenal. Now, if you're 9 points behind at Christmas, it's usually not going to happen for you. Pep was staying in Manchester over the Christmas period. He went to a bakery called Campagno, which is 100% wild-farmed. Got some bread, he really loved it. He went back the next day, got more bread. By the end of the week, he was like, guys, can you do this for the first team? I want to mandate your bread, this Wild Farm bread, for the first team. They were like, no problem, we can do this. They implemented it towards the end of January. That's their form table. That's their form table from when they started working with us. They won the treble that year. That hadn't been done for 20 years. Anyway, what I can tell you is Liverpool have been on it this year. True story, true story. And if you're a Spurs, Aston Villa or Chelsea fan, good news, they're all picking it up from next season. So that's ideal for you. The next one was M&S. We got an opportunity to work with M&S. We were going to do 4 SKUs with them. We had to fight tooth and nail to get Wild Farm put on the front there. At certain points, I was just like, what's the point? They don't get it. The whole thing's a waste of time. Anyway, it was this opportunity to kind of go national, and so I called my dad, and he's in a show called Gavin and Stacey, and I was just like, Dad, we'd just done a show called Britain by Bike. I was like, Dad, what about Britain by Bread? Basically, we go round, we give old ladies, cheese sandwiches in the supermarket, and he was like, yeah, why not? That was June. She was 103 at the time. I hope she's still with us. She'd be 105, and it was actually quite amazing going on the road and going and standing in Marks and Spencer's for a week, because you really started to get a feel for what consumers understood and what resonated with them. And it was really important for us also to build a relationship with the guys at M&S, because what happened next was that we got invited to be part of Farm to Food Hall, which is their big ad campaign. We made a beautiful TV commercial with Tom Kerridge. He came down to our kind of home farm. Off the back of that, we went into the collection sourdough, and now we've got a far bigger project going on with M&S. And so it just shows you, again, if there's anybody with a fledgling business, even though at the beginning I was a bit like, I don't really see where this is going to get us, actually getting through the door and starting that relationship and starting the momentum has ended up with being something really beautiful. Next up, we launched into, jump forward a year, I guess, we launched into Waitrose with our own branded line. I called the old man again. We took a tractor down to Stroud. As you'll be getting the feeling now, Wild Farm don't arrive quietly. So we made this kind of bonkers tractor. Again, being back in the store, talking to people, finding out what was resonating with them, seeing what had moved on in a year's worth of communication, being very bold in an otherwise very beige with our branding. We got in trouble with the Church of England for this one, but anyway, we liked it and it's a good vibe. And then we had a decision to make a TV ad, and we don't have like loads of money, but we thought, you know what, we're going to go for this. We'd just been involved with a big TV show that I'm going to talk about, and so we thought, why don't we have a go at this? So hopefully it'll work.
Have you heard about the bread that's transforming lunchtimes and landscapes? Well, neither has Gemma, but she's about to. Reconnect to the wild. Wildfarmed, life-changing bread, now at Waitrose.
So, just, get out there, tell your story, be bold. Telling the story. We realised that, you know, we got this great stuff going on in the field. We're making it available on the high street. We've got to use every single opportunity we've got to beat the drum and let people know what we're doing. I think we've done reasonably well on our press. And then I turned on the television one day, and this guy he'd started a farming show. And I'm sure some of you will have watched it. But at the end of one of the series, I think it was maybe series 1. He's finished. He's kind of tallying the whole thing up. They've all done loads of work. They spent hundreds of thousands of pounds, the whole thing. And he gets to his profit, and I think he made 114 quid. And he's there going like, what's the point in all of this? This thing's a nightmare. I don't know if I'm going to continue. And I'm screaming at the telly, Jeremy, no, there's another way. We can work with you. So I thought, don't worry, I know loads of people in the media. I'm going to call everybody. I'm going to get an into Jeremy. We're going to get this show on the road. No one would let me into him for some reason. I don't know why. I think everybody's a little bit scared of him. Anyway, I got to the point where I was just asking anybody I met if they knew Jeremy Clarkson. Eventually, somebody said yes. He was like, I deliver bread to his farm shop. I was like, great. And so Max brought him down to our farm. Now, you imagine, I can see this is now the most, the biggest program on Amazon, and I'm thinking, I really want us to be on this show. And on paper, what I knew of Jeremy then, like the kind of mix between him and Andy on paper, like that's not a marriage made in heaven, basically. And I'm thinking, like, I really hope this works. And we're having that whole thing, you know, like in the zoo when they get 2 pandas and they're seeing if it's going to carry on pandas forever. And you're like, please, come on, guys. Anyway, somehow I realised they were both from Yorkshire, and I was like, isn't that mad? You're both from Yorkshire. And they both really went into their Yorkshire accents, which they don't normally have. And then it turned out that Andy had been scouting in Jeremy's mum's garden years ago. And so he invited us onto the show, and we became quite a big storyline in season 3. And Caleb's still getting his head round us, but he's getting there. For those of you who don't know the show, he's the farm manager. He's quite a direct guy. We had this kind of moment off camera, unfortunately, where he came to me, and he's a real advocate for like the old school. And he came to me and he was just like, I really like your hair. And I was like, cool, Caleb, great. And he's got quite kind of funky hair too. And I was like, I think your hair's great. And he went, no, I've wrecked it. And I was like, how have you wrecked it? And he was like, too much chemicals. I said, well, that's very interesting, Caleb. So anyway, we're hoping he's going to be the face of Regen moving forward. We had Andy out on BBC News. It was 25 years ago, Armada. He was segueing seamlessly between life as a superstar DJ and the realities of being a farmer just outside Swindon. So what's next? Where do you guys come into all of this? As far as I can see it, as people who are leading businesses, you've got 2 kind of main objectives. Today, answering the existing needs of your customers. And then the second one is to kind of look down the line and figure out what your customer of tomorrow wants. And so today, if I ask you, hey, what do you think about your customers and regen? I think a lot of you would say, but George, I'm not sure my customers care about regenerative agriculture. Respectfully, I would say you're wrong. And the reason I would say this is actually, for sure, they might not know the terminology yet, but what we do know about your customers is that they're definitely into taste, right? And they're definitely into health. They're definitely into nutrition. They're definitely into safe drinking water. They're definitely into rivers you can swim in. They like nature, birds, bees, and bugs coming back into our fields. And they'd love to be able to use their food choices to be part of the solution. So whilst they don't know the terminology that is regen yet, we've literally got this silver bullet that can answer a lot of the existential problems that we're facing as a society today. And so all we've got to do is get better at storytelling. That's ultimately on us. And so we can decide if we want to commit to this new regenerative future. And if anything I've said today has resonated with you, if you think it's interesting for us to think about bringing quality food from nature-rich landscapes onto the high street, if you think it makes sense that we start paying farmers, rewarding them fairly, not just for the weight of the food that they're producing, but for the quality of the food and the quality of the ecosystems in which they're grown, then please come and talk to us. We are here with open arms. We're ready to do this with you. It's a team game. We've been trying our best. We've been pushing really hard. I think we've been you've been doing a good job of kind of punching through, but if we're going to kick this thing off, we're going to need to work with you guys who are out there and you're running the show, basically. So please come and say hello. I'm here for the next few hours. I know Rob Bray's here. Rob, stick your hand up. Rob's here. Adriana's here as well. There you go. Come and say hello to us, and we'll see if we can figure out how we can collaborate together. Thank you very much for listening, everybody.
Now there must be some questions. Right, who's got any questions for George?
Nobody. Everybody.
Oh, God, you're so shy. Come on. Here we are. We've got one down here.
I've got one.
Shoot.
Okay, one there, and then back to you in a minute.
George, hi. I'm totally sold.
Hamish, can you tell us your name? Because I know you.
My name's Hamish Stoddart. I'm associated with Punch Pubs. Personally, I'm totally sold. But we have customers, guests who come in who are already struggling with the price point on the menu. I know flour isn't a lot in what we sell, and that's why I'm sold, to be honest, because I think I could change flour with relatively little impact. How much is the average difference in price for a hospitality company versus the cheap breaks flour we currently buy?
I mean, if you asked me that a few years ago, it was significantly more. And the reality was, we were having these conversations. We were coming in, we were selling the dream. Everybody's like, yeah, fantastic. And then we were like, and we're twice the price, And obviously that didn't roll very well. And people were like, come back and see us. And gradually we're bringing that down. And for sure, we're trying to get. I don't know that we're ever going to get parity, because the reality is food's not paying its bills at the moment. But if we can get within 20%, 30%, something like that, I think we can start having conversations. And so, yeah, it depends how much you want to buy and how long you want to commit to us for. But certainly now we're not having these ridiculous conversations with people where we can hook you in on the emotional side and then it just doesn't stack up. Ultimately, I get a lot of airtime. Andy gets a lot of airtime. The other fellow who set this up is a money guy. He's worked in the city for the last 30 years. He's not a dreamer. He's a businessman. And if we don't make this stack up from a financial perspective, nothing's going to change.
Question down here.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Miss Lansari. Thank you for the presentation. I think it was really interesting how you were approaching it from multiple different touch points, from like direct to consumers to obviously working with farmers to more corporate kind of organizations. Which one have you found the most, I guess, not just rewarding, but a bigger impact that you can kind of continue the storytelling part that will make the biggest difference sustainably, but also commercially?
I mean, when we first started, we thought that the farmers were going to be the tricky ones, basically, and we thought we were going to come out into the world. We've all had our Deloitte reports. The next generation just wants it. They're desperate for it. They're ready to pay for it. We've just got to try and get the farmers on board, and they're going to be really difficult because they're set in their ways. And the reality of the situation is a lot of farmers out there are fed up with what's going on. Increasingly, they're putting more and more chemicals on their land. All they know is that they're definitely going to be more expensive than they were last year. They have no idea in this erratic weather what's going to come out the back end, and so they're getting squeezed from every angle. And they broadly they want to try something else. We've only been doing it maybe like 5 years with our cohort of farmers, but I love dealing with the farmers. They're very straightforward people. You know where you stand with them. You go there, you shake hands, you make a deal, and so they've been great to work with. Similarly, the artisan community was very easy fit for us because they meet these farmers with ambition. They're really desperate to build integrity deep into the DNA of their business, and it's usually their business, and so they can kind of jiggle things around to make it stack up financially. But to be honest with you, like we're yet to hit any real kind of like blocks in the road where other than those I was speaking before, saying to that gentleman, when we were coming in and we weren't being realistic on price, obviously we were doing it as cheap as we could at the time. But yeah, other than that, like broadly speaking, I think people want to do this, and I think there's an appetite for it, and I think it's innate. Our connection to nature is innate in all of us, and ultimately we want to try and do the right thing, and if we can make it stack up, I think we will do.
How fast is the move towards regenerative farming? Do you know?
Well, I mean, look, we're still a drop in the ocean. Ultimately, it's about storytelling. You know, there's so many things. You know, like, you know, we all used to take minicabs. You don't take minicabs anymore. You take Ubers. You know, because they built another story. They built another narrative.
Yeah.
There's a million different examples of that across every single sector. The reality of the situation is we just need to start a new narrative. That narrative can be a regenerative narrative. And it can deliver on all of the things that we know the consumer of tomorrow and today, frankly, want. And so we just need to harness that. But of course, if we're just Wildfarmed and it's just Wildfarmed's, you know, kind of marketing spend and share of voice, it's going to be it's a very long game.
Yeah. One final question there.
Hi, George.
Hi.
John Mead from Hall & Woodhouse. So as a regional brewer and pub restaurant operator, our model relies on us having an aggregator we would buy through. So on our brewing side, maltsters for the grain, and in our managed houses, someone who was on your list for the majority of our food, which is bought in pre-prepared. So there's obviously this. You guys are trying to push Wildfarmed into those supply chains, and we're trying to pull. What would be your advice on helping to accelerate that journey? And
we're just going through it with one of the nation's biggest maltsters at the moment, basically. So the way they do it is they mass balance, and we're trying to get out of that because obviously we want this level of traceability that we don't have. Fortunately, I'm not dealing with it, but we're looking at how we develop infrastructure with major processing plants, I guess, and producers, so that we can have a kind of Wildfarmed offering in there.
Yeah. Well, we'll be talking about beer and maltsters a bit later on after lunch. But for the time being, fantastic. Ladies and gentlemen, George Lamb.